Billy, good to see you, man. This has been, hopefully you're safe and sound. It's been a crazy year, I know, for everybody involved. Good to catch up with you briefly here. Just talking some Aggie football, man. You're on the scene. You're in the mix. You know what's going on there with A&M, and it's been a good year for these guys. What are you seeing that's standing out to you, the job Jimbo is doing and his staff are doing with his football team?
Yeah, and Randy, same back at you, man. I hope everyone's safe, you and your family. It has been a wild fall. I'm just thankful we've got sports and we've got football, NFL, college, everything. So, certain teams were prepared to take advantage, I thought, of the wild off season. And I thought they were the veteran teams with experienced quarterbacks that didn't have a lot of coaching turnover, that had a head coach that wasn't going to, lose his grip and let things fall through the cracks, with so much uncertainty, and was just going to kind of keep the eye on the prize. And Jimbo fits that criteria. They returned the same offensive and defensive schemes and returned a ton of starters. So I thought heading into the season, A&M was really poised to maybe succeed where others would fail. And you look around at some of the programs, Michigan, Penn State, Texas, LSU, some really big name programs that have struggled. Even Oklahoma, who's rebounded starting to put together a really nice season. They started off with kind of inexplicable back-to-back losses. It's been tough for everybody, but I thought A&M checked those boxes. And then they got hit where the schedule changed, and all of a sudden you added Florida, you added Tennessee, you had to play Alabama early. They didn't look great early. They hung in there, and they put it all together kind of just in the perfect time, which is basically in time for Florida, and they've been rolling ever since. I know a lot of people, Randy, have talked about this past weekend, and they said, well, did they pass the eyeball test? Were they convincing? Last 4 SEC games, the closest an opponent's been to A&M through 3 quarters is 20 points, 3 touchdowns. That's Arkansas, South Carolina, LSU, and Mississippi State. And then, of course, 5 games ago, they beat Florida. They're playing exceptional football. They took a step back offensively this week after having 2 weeks off. But, Randy, to go all the way back to your original question, what it is they win both lines of scrimmage week after week. They've got a senior veteran quarterback, and quietly they're the number 1 ranked defense in the SEC through 7 games.
Yeah, it's amazing to watch how that transformation is taking place. When you see big picture now, I mean, we're on the final stretch of the season right now, and everybody's eyeballing these new rankings. The new ones came out last night. Aggies are still number 5 outside looking in, but they need a little help, and, of course, they need to take care of business as well. How do you think this is going to play out with now news that perhaps this Michigan-Ohio State game might get canceled? How can that play in with the Buckeye situation and the Aggies before we get to Florida? How could that develop and affect things in the top 4?
Well, that was a really new development last weekend, with Ohio State not playing. And I just don't think Ohio State playing 5 games, they're not getting in. If they play 6, I still think they'd have to win a Big Ten title for it to even be a discussion. If they play 6 and they don't get to play in the championship game, I just don't think it's going to happen. And I think you started to see those seeds planted this past weekend, or this last night, actually, with them kind of sliding down a notch there to 4. And if you really listen to the chairman of the committee, they're basically saying it felt like A&M was closer to 4 than they were to 5. So the Big Ten dynamic has gotten pretty fascinating. Even if Northwestern were to upset Ohio State, now that Northwestern's lost, there's this whole world where the Big Ten could quite possibly not get anyone in. Of course, they'll have no one to blame but themselves for just kind of trying to force their agenda on all the other conferences and getting out in front, when really patience was the most prudent option back in August and September. So they're reaping what they sow right now on the scheduling front. But, it came out today that Ole Miss is shutting down. They're shutting things down for a couple days here, try to get back later in the week. So that would be one to watch, because for as dangerous as that Ole Miss offense is, A&M would benefit a lot if we're talking about the playoffs as the goal. A&M will benefit a great deal from playing 10 games versus 5 or 6.
All right, the Florida situation right now, number 6. What do you read into where they are now, and what lies ahead for the Gators? And of course, I'm talking about including an SEC championship game appearance, and say they beat Alabama. How much could that help the Gators maybe overtake maybe an A&M, maybe something? What scenario do you see playing out should Florida win out?
If Florida wins out, they're passing A&M, and Alabama's probably. They beat A&M by 4 touchdowns early in the season. They're going to hang in the playoffs as a 3 or 4 seed. So if Florida wins out, and they've got to beat this Bama team that looks so formidable, but if they did, and if the Houston guy, Kyle Trask, can get it done, Florida's going to be in, and I would say they deserve to be in, even though A&M beat them. They would be the champions of the toughest conference in the country. They would have beaten number 1, and you can't really argue. And then you hope that Ohio State and, then you would hope Notre Dame beats Clemson and Ohio State fell out. And you could have the nightmare scenario for the rest of the world, which would be 3 SEC teams in the playoff. And ironically enough, Randy, you'd probably have the rematch, not Alabama A&M, but you'd probably have the A&M Florida rematch in the semifinal. So you just cooked up a really nice scenario. But I think realistically, Florida beats Alabama, they're probably taking A&M's spot. And even if they were to jump A&M the rest of the way, if they lose to Bama, they're falling back behind them anyway. So no matter what happens, the Aggies will be watching that one closely. And like you said, they got to win out. This Saturday at Auburn. Auburn's always been problematic for A&M. That's a tough team. I wouldn't say they're great. I would say A&M's the better team based on what we've seen this year. But it's not a big gap. So that's going to be a tough one. Ole Miss in that offense scares anybody. And then a road trip to Tennessee doesn't scare you on paper. It just reminds you of like that Miami UCLA game back in '98 on the day when A&M beat K-State, Edger and James in Miami in that hurricane game that was made up, upset number 1 UCLA. It's dangerous. It's a tough schedule to close out for the Aggies. It's very tough. I'll feel a lot more confident if they get by this weekend. And Randy, one thing I wanted to point out, we're on in Houston, and you've been such a great ambassador for Houston sports for so long. A&M offense is pretty fascinating. You got Kenyon Green, Ryan McCullum, and Dan Moore, all Houston guys starting up front. You've got Aniyah Smith. You got Isaiah Spiller, Jalen Weidemeyer out of Dickinson, and Chase Lane and Hez Jones at receiver. I think by my count, it's like 8 of 11 starters on offense are from the Houston area. I know Houston recruits A&M a lot, but that's even for the Aggies, that's a really high number and some real star power at those skill spots. Yeah, no doubt. That certainly delivered this year. I want to ask you real quick as we wrap it up, the job Jimbo has done to this point of his tenure, is he ahead of schedule? Did you expect they would be kind of in this position? Obviously with COVID being a factor and everything like that, but at this point of his tenure in Aggieland, did you think they would be, in the conversation for a playoff? I was hopeful. Year 3, if they get in there, I'd say ahead of schedule. Mm-hmm. If they get in. Being in contention in year 3, I think that was I think that's kind of the plan. And I thought people were getting ahead of themselves criticizing him nationally and even throughout the state and region in year 2. He played 5 top 7 teams, and he did it with 1 senior starting after a breakout first year. And everybody was ready to pile on. And when they played Florida, everybody was ready to pile on. Jimbo is 23-4 against teams, Randy, not ranked 1 or 2 since he's been at A&M. If they're not 1 or 2, he's 23-4. And 2-2 against top 10 teams not ranked 1 or 2. So it's not like, we're moving the target here. They just haven't beaten the national title contenders. And they did it this year with Florida, and they're hoping to get another crack at it in the playoff. But I think he's on schedule with the potential to be ahead of schedule. And if you look at the way they're recruiting, and I mentioned those Houston area guys, there's about 3 or 4 of them right now in the Houston area. They're trying to close out down the stretch here with signing day 2 weeks away. But think he's going to recruit 3 straight top 10 classes, number 3, number 6. And then this year they'll have an excellent chance to, I think, be in that top 6 to 8 range when it's all said and done.
Well, great insight as always, Billy, man. Thanks for the time. It's an exciting time, I know, for Aggie football. Kind of a nerve-wracking time, I know, for a lot of the fans that are following it as well. You're in the trenches with it every day, and we'll see how it plays out. I think you're right, man. We could talk down the stretch, but they got to take care of Auburn, and I agree with that. I don't know if that's going to be an easy day at the office on Saturday or not, but as they say, one at a time. That's what they're going to do. So, hey, man, great conversation, good insight, man. Let's do it again soon.
All right, Randy. Thanks, buddy. Anytime, man.